Welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 217th episode, our guest is Melissa Maerz. Melissa Maerz has worked as an editor at Spin and Rolling Stone, a staff writer for Entertainment Weekly and the Los Angeles Times, and a supervising producer on HBO's Vice News Tonight. She was a founding editor at New York Magazine's Vulture website. She lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband and 2 kids. Her first book, All Right, The Oral History of Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused, was published November 17th, 2020 by Harper. And now on to the show. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Thanks for asking, and thanks for reading the book.
Oh, no problem. It was a great pleasure. But just to start off with, for people who don't know who you are, could you go ahead and just introduce yourself real quick?
I'm Melissa Maerz, and I'm the author of All Right.
Yeah, definitely. And I just really enjoyed the book. It was so much fun. It hits a lot of my interest areas. I love the format of oral history. I think it's such a good way to tell a complicated story with a lot of characters in it. From different perspectives. And also I have at various times said that Richard Linklater is my favorite director. So it's perfect. It's just amazing. So
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, I love oral histories too. I feel like there's, in so many art books, you hear this, what sounds like a narrative of this like one single genius who realized his vision. And so often it's more complicated than that. People are kind of feeding each other's creativity. And even though it's mostly one person's vision, or it might be mostly one person's vision, this creativity kind of feeds each other. The crew feeds the actors, feed the director, feed the producer. It just is kind of this cross-pollinating system. So I really like hearing from everybody in an oral history format for that reason.
Definitely. And, this movie is such an ensemble movie anyway, that I feel like it almost had to have that format just to get all the various perspectives, included.
And an oral history kind of feels like the format of a Linklater movie, right? It's like everyone's kind of talking over each other or contradicting each other. I mean, I think it kind of has some of the same things I love about dialogue in a Linklater movie, or the things I love about oral histories too.
Right. But what drew you to this subject initially? When did you first encounter this movie? Is this your favorite movie?
Well, it's definitely the movie I have seen the most in my life. I mean, like you, I loved Richard Linklater, have loved Richard Linklater since I was a kid. I saw it in the theater. I was, I think, going into my sophomore year of high school, which in Oregon, where I grew up, was my first year of high school. There's no freshman year at my high school. So I saw it right in the fall of my first year of high school. So it was kind of the perfect time to go see it. And I always tell people it didn't feel like a movie about the past to me, even though it was set in the 70s and I saw it in the 90s. It kind of felt like this is going to be your future in the next couple of years. This is what high school is going to be like. It's going to be about partying with older kids, driving around in a car, listening to great music. It made me excited. Like I felt like it was, going to be this great time. And it's only now as an adult that I watched the movie and I realized how much sadder it is than I had originally thought.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And, I have 3 kids now, so I see everything from the parents' perspective in every movie now. I can't help but put myself in that role. Whereas before I was a father, it's just like I would always see myself in the kid role. You know what I mean? It's like now I can't help but sympathize with the parent roles in any given situation. So.
Absolutely. I mean, you watch The Breakfast Club and I'm like, the teacher's a jerk, but he's kind of right sometimes.
Exactly.
You hate to be that way, but you kind of become that person.
I know. What do you want your kids doing? Screaming and breaking windows with their voice after they smoke the marijuana cigarette?
Right.
Exactly. Like I mentioned, I love Richard Linklater, and I think he captures so much, about that time period. And, I grew up in Southern Indiana in a small town, and this felt very relevant to my life as far as like what because you see these kids in the movie like doing like the paddling and like the hazing rituals, and you're like, how did anyone get away with this? And like the teacher's like smirking about it, and it's like, but I mean, that kind of stuff. I can remember there was a senior parade. I participated in it in senior year of high school, where we'd go around town and the police would lead it, and we'd like throw stuff out the side of the trucks at people's. We'd take out people's mailboxes, and yeah, it was wild. And like, people would have farm equipment they drive down the street that you wouldn't normally be able to, and there was no permit or anything, like, and people property damage left and right, and all this kind of stuff. And
it's interesting, like, this is the thing about the book. It's like the more specific it gets, the more universal it feels. A lot of people would tell me that the only thing they couldn't really relate to was the paddling. And what's weird to me is that, when I went back and talked to Linklater's friends at Huntsville, that was very specific to their experience, that this was happening. And then once I tell people that, they often say, oh, well, there was this thing I had at school, but it wasn't paddling. Everyone's kind of got their version of what that was.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. But just going back to the oral history format, logistically, you've been a journalist for some time. This is your first book, though, and oral history requires a lot of, transcription, I'm sure, and also keeping stories straight and what people have told you, and comparing that to the other. Just logistically, for you on this project, how did you manage that workload?
Yeah. So I started writing the book from the very beginning. So, I think the first interview I did was, an interesting thing, was with the unit publicist on the movie. And I didn't even plan on interviewing him. I just planned on, seeing if he had some documents left over from that time that I could start with for research. And this guy, who actually lived in the hotel with the actors and partied with the actors, might have given me the best framework for all the things I wanted to follow up with. He just remembered everything, and everything he told me checked out. So I had a 3-hour interview with him, and I kind of blocked out his interview into some of the themes I thought would be important going forward. Those themes changed over time, but I kind of put them into categories. And did that from the very beginning. And then every interview I did after that, I took out the quotes I thought would be important and blocked them into similar categories, or made, new categories, and just kind of went from there. I don't think I would have been able to write this book if I'd waited till the end and had gone, because I had so many interviews. I mean, I had, it was 150 people, but I think I interviewed every person, or most of those people, 2 or 3 times.
Wow. Okay.
So it was a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it. And then also I used a service called Rev to transcribe my interviews.
Okay.
And it was helpful to be able to go back and search those interviews for certain terms.
Yes, I can imagine. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, no, I think my least favorite part, or at least the most difficult, challenging part of being a journalist for me, is the transcribing interviews. So I would love to find some kind of workaround for that. I've tried Otter, I think, is one of them, and then it's okay. I mean, and I think Google Voice does text to speech, or maybe there's like, I don't know, something, but I need to research that further, because that is, I find that arduous sometimes.
Yeah, but they haven't really perfected, like Rev uses actual humans to transcribe.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's why I trusted it, or why I trusted it for this book.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds right. So you said you interviewed these people 2 or 3 times, because you do have people responding to the quotes that other people gave you. So I'm assuming you would talk to somebody, they'd say something about another person on the movie, you would go back to that person on the movie, get the reaction to put next to the initial statement, right? I mean, you kind of had to do a bunch of follow-ups, I imagine.
Yeah. So mostly it was more conversational than it seems. I mean, I put a note in the beginning of the book saying, oral histories kind of seem like you're all at the bar together talking about this stuff. And that's not actually how it is. So sometimes I would just kind of tell someone generally what had been said about something, and they would respond. But if there was something specific to that person, like with Ben Affleck, I would say, this person said this about you in this specific scene. How do you respond to this? I would literally read the quote, and then he would respond. So there are a couple instances where I felt like if it had to do with, something negative said about somebody, or something to do with drinking or drugs, I felt like it was fair to tell that person exactly what had been said about them, and they would respond.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And you got pretty much everyone here. It's pretty amazing how the breadth of the people you spoke with, and you had the cooperation of Richard Linklater, which I think was essential for the book. I don't know how you do this without it.
You couldn't.
No. And you pretty much got everyone who was available except for Sean Andrews and Mila Jovovich for reasons that become obvious later in the book. But
and Jason O. Smith,
yes,
who's the one person I'm really, I feel really bad that I was never able to contact him. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask if there had been any updates since the book had been published on any of those, but it doesn't sound like it. Maybe.
So, it is so strange. I tried so hard with him. I went to, there's a Facebook page for his high school. I posted there asking if anyone who had graduated for his class, actually specifically his class at his high school. So I posted there asking if anybody had heard from him. No one had heard from him on that Facebook site. People have actually followed up with me through that Facebook site, asking if I was able to track him down. I contacted his family. I've contacted all sorts of people. His brother did get in touch with me after the book came out and said that he had lost touch with him. He doesn't know where he is either. But I have not been able to find an obituary for him. I'm hoping that he is somewhere living his best life and just has not gotten back to me. But he's the real person that his voice is missing in this book.
Yeah, but I read it after I got done with the book. I was like, well, I think she did pretty much everything she could do to get all the voices. I don't feel like you left any stones unturned. You have some pretty big interviews with people that are, weren't big then, but are big now. Ben Affleck, future President McConaughey. So who was the hardest and the easiest interviews to get? I'm sure once you had Richard Linklater's cooperation, that opened a few doors, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I think, both directly and indirectly with Linklater, I think that people, he's such a this is like a regular person. That's not a great way to describe.
Yeah, no, I heard his WTF interview, and I was like, this guy seems like he's nothing like I would picture. It was like this. I thought he would be like this, like dark poet or auteur, but it's like he seems like just a regular dude. Like he doesn't seem like pretentious at all. So.
Yeah, and I think that people, the reason why I got as many interviews that I did of the people who are bigger stars is just that they have such good feelings about him. It's like I got Ben Affleck, I think, because he told me that Dazed and Confused was the most profound creative experience of his career, and said that it influenced him writing Good Will Hunting, and it influenced him wanting to become a director and winning an Oscar for Argo. So he's still, obviously, this movie holds a huge place in his mind. And I think that's why he wanted to talk to me. He did agree very early on to be interviewed for this book. And then it took him a year to actually answer the phone when I called.
Right. Yeah.
And Renee Zellweger had already told me no, that she wouldn't do it. And then at the very last minute, through a different contact, I was able to get her to change her mind. And I'm glad that she agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now this isn't like meant to be a quiz or whatever, so don't be nervous, but I did go back and I tried to fill in all my missing parts of the Richard Linklater filmography. So I was going to go through that real quick. So starting at the beginning, 1988, It's Impossible to Learn to Plow by Reading Books. It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. I have not seen it yet. I started watching a little bit of it. It reminds me a lot of Slacker from what I saw. Did you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. What's great about that movie, and this is not my idea, his friends have told me this too, is that you watch it and you see him becoming a filmmaker. He's not someone who went to film school. He got interested in film fairly late in life compared to some other directors. Late in life, meaning like in his 20s, but a lot of people have already, found their favorite directors and really delved deep into film by then. And he did not. And you really see him in that movie teaching himself how to be a filmmaker. He's in it. He filmed it. He ran audio. People have told me that I haven't noticed this myself, but that there's some scenes where you can actually see the audio equipment in the frame because he's recording himself as he's shooting it. So it's kind of an amazing document just showing, that but you can see this context of how he taught himself to become a filmmaker when he was young and in Austin. And you can also see a certain amount of the plotlessness to his films come from there. You could see that in Slacker. You can definitely see that in Dazed to a lesser degree. But I think watching that movie, you can kind of see where he's going with his career.
Yeah, definitely. 1990 Slacker, I had not seen before I started reading your book, so I did have to go back and watch that, which I thought it was great. I hadn't seen it before, but I thought it was really, really good. And I read Patton Oswalt's review of your book in the New York Times book review, and I think that he said something really good in that. It's like there's some conversations in this movie that I thought were profound 20 years ago that I think are ridiculous now, and some things I dismissed that I find profound now, and I'm sure it'll be different if I watch it again. And I can totally feel that just listening to like that one guy that follows the person home and talks about global warming and the billionaires are trying to get off the planet. I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. Elon Musk, he's trying to go to Mars.
That's the first one I thought of. That's exactly that's the one that feels the most relevant. And that guy, everybody tells me they're like, in real life, that guy was crazy.
Oh,
like,
I'm sure. You know, yeah, right.
Like he had all these crackpot theories. And it turns out some of those crackpot theories aren't so crackpot.
I know, right? I was like, he's talking about 30 years later. But then, of course, we got Dazed and Confused, 93, 95, Before Sunrise. I've seen that a long time ago. I loved it. Thought it was great. 96 Suburbia, I have not seen. Have you seen that one?
Yes, I have.
Okay. All right. I heard it's very Clerks like.
Oh, interesting. You know, it's
I can't remember where I heard that, but
well, it's funny, you know, I interviewed Kevin Smith for this book. He very much says that Richard Linklater was a huge influence on him. But I guess I could see some cross-pollinating between the two of them.
Yeah.
It's Eric Bogosian, right? So it's like it's got its own kind of dialogue, but you can also feel you know, it's a very Linklater film too. I mean, it's great. I haven't seen it in a long time,
right?
But it feels very much of that era to me.
Yeah, totally. Now the Newton Boys, 98. I believe I saw it on HBO 20 years ago, but I couldn't tell you a thing about it other than I saw it. But 2001 Waking Life. That's my second favorite movie ever. I love it. It blew me away. I saw it. 2001 was my first year of college. You can imagine, you know, blew my mind. I love the rotoscope style. I could not be a movie critic on any movie that features that style because I'm already 51% on board with any movie that uses that style. And so I'm not an objective observer, but I absolutely love that movie. Get something new out of it every time out of it. So
have you seen the TV show Undone?
No.
It's rotoscoped. It's Tommy Mottola's involved with it, who was involved with Slacker. I think you might like that if you're already kind of in the zone for that.
I am. I'm writing that down. Undone. Tape I didn't see. The
Tape is great.
Oh, okay, cool.
Tape to me just kind of embodies how much Richard Linklater can do with extremely little. You know, you've got all kind of takes place in one place. It's such a, you know, there's only a couple of people in the whole film, and yet it is riveting. It's funny. I asked him once, thinking of Tape, I asked him once, you know, do you ever want to go back and do really small movies? And he was kind of got mad, and he was like, I'm always doing kind of small movies. You know, or like not small, but like, you know, trying to maintain this independent spirit, I think.
Yeah, definitely. 2003 School of Rock. I love that movie. Mike White wrote that movie. I'm a huge fan of his. Did you see White Lotus?
I did. I mean, I love him. I think
oh man, that was so good.
The Dog, I think, is a very underrated Mike White movie. I mean, I love Chuck and Buck. I mean, I just think that he is a fantastic. If he has written something, I will see it.
Yeah, 100%. 2004 Before Sunset. I thought that was great too. Very worthy follow-up. 2005 Bad News Bears. I hated that movie. I watched it for the first time in preparation of this. It did not age very well at all. Very of its time. Sorry, Richard Linklater, if you're listening. I did not like it.
It's interesting, you know, for a movie that's a more what I would think of as a more mainstream choice for him. It still feels personal to me for him because, you know, he grew up playing baseball.
Sure.
You know,
100%.
Era, and he even talks about how baseball has influenced his career, that he kind of approaches directing like a coach, and that, making these ensembles feel like they're making decisions, even though, the ultimate decision creatively is his. And people have talked about how his career is kind of a long game, like baseball is, that it's not about, having, a win every single time. It's about being able to develop over the course of a career, a slower game kind of, but with still grand aims. So I think it makes sense to me that he chose that if he was going to make a more mainstream choice, that's the movie he chose.
Oh, sure. And yeah, I get it. I totally understand why you said yes to that. Obviously, baseball is a huge theme in his career, even in Dazed, of course. Yeah, but 2006, Scanner Darkly, I love it. You already know.
I love it too. Yeah.
It's
funny. Rory Cochrane was like, I worked for Linklater and Dazed and Confused, like keep hoping he'd bring me back. It's like, brings me back and I'm still a drug addict.
I know, right? Nothing's changed in their intervening 15 years.
Right. But it's so great, right? It's like, if anyone can do Philip K. Dick, I feel like that's a perfect,
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
Fast Food Nation, I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't. I've read the book too. I thought it was worthy. Did not see 2008 Inning by Inning or Me and Orson Welles. I did not see either of those.
Oh, Inning by Inning, I would well, they're both good, obviously, but Inning by Inning, I think, is really interesting because you can see again stuff about baseball, and again, with these themes in Richard Linklater's life, but you can also see the influence of him on a filmmaker. As a filmmaker, I would definitely recommend that. I think it's really good. Yeah.
All right. Okay. 2011, Bernie. I love that movie. So good.
Bernie is my favorite Jack Black movie. I think he is
indeed
incredible in it.
Oh, yeah. I know. Love lifted.
And McConaughey's mom.
What?
McConaughey's mom is in it.
Where? Who?
She is one of the people that there's all those
townsfolk. She's one of the townsfolk?
She's one of the townsfolk. She is a character. Look her up. She is a character. Wow. In her own right.
Do you know which one she is? Like what line
I can
she might
tell
have
you
said?
what she looks like, but I can't remember what.
Okay, that's okay. I'll look it up. Yeah. That's fascinating though.
Yeah.
Okay. 2013, Before Midnight. I don't think I cared for that one that much. I think that was one movie too many in that series. I feel like we could have left it with the second one, and then I don't need to see them fighting as a married couple. It's okay. Like I don't need to see.
It's definitely more of a bummer of a movie, right?
Oh, I know, right? Let's walk around a town and talk about stuff. All right. 2014, Boyhood. I mean, what can you say? A technical achievement on every level. You just blown away.
What I love about that movie? I love that you keep thinking, he kind of keeps making you think that something terrible is going to happen to the kid. And nothing ever does. And I think that's kind of the experience of being a parent, right? It's just this constant paranoia that there's a gun in that garage and that kid is going to end up having an accident with this gun, or one of his friends is, and it never really happens. And I love that element to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't seen it since it first came out, but maybe I should go back and check it out. It was like 3 hours long too. I don't know. The older I get, 90 minutes. I want a movie, 90-minute movie. Anyway, 2016, Everybody Wants Some. I thought was a good, it was almost like a sequel to Dazed in some ways,
yes,
I thought.
Definitely.
Not directly, of course, but in spirit,
Spiritual
I thought.
Sequel.
Yeah, there you go. Speaking of which, 2017, Last Flag Flying. I had not seen The Last Detail, but I did go back and watch that. Before this, so I thought that was a really good movie. I have yet to see Last Flag Flying yet, but I know it's streaming on Amazon, I think, right now, so I need to go check that out.
Yeah, great cast, man.
Yeah. Where'd You Go, Bernadette? I saw that and I didn't even realize it was Linklater. I just thought this is a weird, cool movie. I didn't even realize that was Richard Linklater when I went and saw it, but it was really good. So,
have you read the book?
No, my wife has actually. So,
it's great.
Yeah. And then I just saw, for preparing for this, the Apollo 10.5, The Space Age Childhood. Did you see that?
This is the only one I haven't seen. And it's because I'm waiting to watch it with my son.
Okay. How old is your son?
8.
Okay. He's probably getting close to, because my son just turned 8, and I was debating on whether or not to show it to him, or whether I should hold off, because it is a lot. I think the kid's maybe like 10 or 11, maybe he's a little older than 8, but I think it's still relevant, and it's once again rotoscoped. I'm all the way in visually, and Jack Black does the narration too. So that's another point in its favor. And also I found out that I didn't know this before. His mom, do you know about his mom?
Jack Black's mom?
Yeah.
No.
She worked on the Apollo missions, and she was one of the people that was responsible for getting the Apollo 13 astronauts back from their mishaps in space.
I did not know that. That's incredible.
So I'm sure that probably had some bearing on him being involved in that. Obviously, with Bernie and stuff too, but and anyway, really good movie.
What's interesting about Apollo 10.5 is I think a lot of people don't realize how, again, like really personal subject matter for Linklater, that before he was in Huntsville, he was in Houston, and NASA was really, part of this culture. And he said it really felt like, living in the future when he was young, but it was just, people always kind of talking about the space age. So it makes sense to me that, again, that comes back in his subject matter.
Definitely. Well, thank you for going through that. I've just spent so much time watching these movies. I had to talk about them with somebody.
Yeah, of course. Like your audience.
For sure. So anyway, going back to Dazed, just the casting in this movie is amazing, which I think from reading your book is mostly a credit to Don Phillips. It definitely explains how some of these actors were also paired up again in future movies. You mentioned Kevin Smith, of course, Mallrats. I'd say at least a half a dozen people from that movie are also in this one. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We've got McConaughey and Renee Zellweger for that one too.
The sequel, yes.
Oh, right. But it's just amazing how they were able to find these people that would be like, Renee Zellweger doesn't even have a line in this movie, right? She's just a background character. So that's mean, they've just got talent, coming out the ears. They don't even know what to do with these people. So it's pretty amazing. Now, okay, so you have a whole chapter on this, which I'm glad you do, of the namesake of this book. All right. And I think it's hilarious to me that that McConaughey is like the one man marketing department for this phrase, as you put it, because I went, and it's funny, I went and watched a couple interviews with him after I read the book, and he tells like the identical story he has in your book, just again and again. He's got this down. It's like one of his scripts or whatever he just runs through. And it's funny because I even know which Doors song he's referring to, because I was also reading an oral history of the Doors with Ben Fong Torres that did.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I went back and was listening to some Doors, and I heard that Roadhouse Blues song where he's like, all right. So I knew exactly which one. But I don't know how much of that is him reconstructing that.
Yes,
it's like it's a nice story, but it's like it's so perfect. Like, is that really what you were thinking that day? Or
exactly. It's funny because at first I was a little bit bummed that I'm like, oh, he's just giving me the same story that he gives over and over again. But then I kind of thought that's perfect, right? Yeah. That's what he is. Like, like you were saying, he's like this one man marketing machine.
Yeah.
This phrase, and he is the reason why it's become in a movie full of quotable phrases. That is the one phrase that's most memorable. It's crazy to me. Like, all right is more than, any of the other quotable phrases. And it's because of McConaughey. And it's because it feels like an origin story to him, that this was the start of his career, or was the start of, a through line with Don Phillips of getting him into the industry. So I understand why it's important to him. But, it's funny, that Doors thing, he was telling me this story and it was almost like he'd forgot about that. And then I brought up the Doors and he was like, oh yeah, it was the Doors.
Sure.
So, it's just become so crystallized in his head that it's become, this mythology that he's perpetuating.
Yeah.
And it's funny, someone else sent me an Austin City Limits performance of Willie Nelson way back in the day, that ends with him saying, all right. So it might have just been something that was in the ether. It might not have been quite as calculated as McConaughey says, that he was thinking this and inspired by this. It might just have been something that people said around that time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But for him, it's a story.
Sure, 100%. And his character is so, I mean, if my daughters were near that guy, I'd tell them to go across the street to the other side of the street. I wouldn't, but he's so endearing. in this movie. And even his most creepiest, his other catchphrase about, I just get, they just stay the same age and all that kind of stuff. That's a super creepy thing to say, but he's so he's just endearing and charming that he just overcomes that creepiness somehow, and he totally steals every scene he's in. So
yeah, and even if he, like, I think for a lot of people he doesn't overcome that creepiness.
Oh, really?
Like they watch this movie and they are totally disgusted by that guy. And I think that's okay too, because I think the important thing is that you recognize that guy. I think a lot of people had a Wooderson at their high school. A lot of people had a lot of those characters at their high school. Definitely a Slater. Everyone tells me they had a Slater at their high school. So I think that's the great thing about a lot of Linklater's movies, is that he doesn't moralize about these characters. He just kind of lets you feel about these characters how you're going to feel. And that's hard to do in a movie about young people, because so often now you have to have a message about, is this character good or is this character bad? People are afraid to let their kids watch stuff where they're going to come to their own conclusions.
Definitely. Speaking of creepiness, the chapter I found most jaw-dropping was the "We Were All Hormonal" chapter about all the hookups. Just to run down a few of it, we've got we mentioned Mila Jovovich and Shawn Andrews. She was underage. Their marriage was annulled months after the movie. Jason Lee is the adult guardian of Marissa Ribisi, and her mother is his manager. Christian, I don't know how to say her name. Hano.
Hinojosa.
There you go. And then what was the second one? Kirkskin Bond is pursued at 16 by 26-year-old pretending to be 22 Sasha Jensen. So the 70s were a different time. The 90s were also a different time.
Or were they? I mean,
or were they? Sure.
Same as it ever was, as they say in the movie. It's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, I haven't talked to Mila, so I can't say anything from her perspective. But as far as I know from what other people have told me in those relationships, like even Kristen, she's like, it was uncool that Sasha lied to me about how old he was, but it was mostly a pretty sweet, innocent thing, and I feel okay about it. So I'm glad that's the case, because you hear those things, or you even read that on paper, and immediately I just feel sad to my bones, but they feel okay about it.
Okay, well, that's fine, as long as they feel okay. But I'm glad you had such a focus on the soundtrack in the book, because it is just a rock solid soundtrack. In that way, it reminds me of another of my favorite movies, Boogie Nights. Just so essential. I'm just horrified to hear that they wanted to have this band Jackal record a song, or maybe include some random bendy guitar notes. Like, that would have ruined the movie. Like, it would have totally taken everything down several notches. So
and I kind of feel, I talked to the guy from Jackal, and I kind of feel bad for the band, man, because I don't even think it was their idea. I think some record exec was like, okay, we can use this movie to promote this band that we need to promote, so let's just get them to do this. You forget how much MTV was a factor in promoting movies back then. Like, I remember seeing so many videos that would have like a montage from a movie, and that was the first time you kind of had any insight into whether or not you wanted to see that movie. I think of Wayne's World and Bohemian Rhapsody, and the video for that, as it had been reconstructed with Queen footage and footage from Wayne's World. So I think it was, I understand the idea of trying to get a new band to record an old song and help it promote the movie, but I think for both Richard Linklater and Jackal, it was not the best thing.
And I also find it interesting that they didn't know how to market this movie, just because it's so iconic now. And I also think it's interesting that Richard Linklater tried to make an anti-nostalgia movie, and it's like, I would say, one of the most nostalgic movies. Like, it makes me nostalgic, and I wasn't even alive in the 70s, so it's like, it's like, okay. I mean, I guess because I thought about it, and I think it's because he shows both sides of it, the great, the good, and the bad. So he doesn't just do one. And so it's like he's admitting the parts that were difficult, so you can enjoy the parts that are good. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a trade-off.
And, you know, it's like Kevin Smith said about this, you know, that's the thing. You can't choose what you want people to get from the movie. Like, they're just going to get what they're going to get. And they're going to bring their own experience to it. So I think what he does is, again, it's about like him not moralizing. He's just showing a scene. And if you had a good time in high school, you're going to think that's a nostalgic scene. And if you had a bad time in high school, you're going to think it's a gritty portrayal. You know, I mean, anyone who had trouble with bullies is going to watch those bully scenes and think, you know, this can't be a nostalgic movie, because I remember being bullied, and I'm never going to look back and think those times were great. So I think it's, you know, a lot of people are very nostalgic about it, but I think there's still, you know, definite ways to watch this movie and think that it is an anti-nostalgia movie. I mean, you have characters literally telling you the 70s suck.
Yeah, I was like, I'll take your word for it. I don't know, it looks pretty cool from here, but okay, whatever. But I'm so glad that the sequel and the series never happened. That would have not been great. I think we just well enough alone, you know, don't need to do any more to it. Kind of glad that fell apart. How
crazy is that, right?
I know.
I mean, and it's funny, this whole thing that some people are convinced that 70s show was
right.
TV's version of not being able to get Linklater's permission to do Dazed and Confused on TV. Although the creator of that 70s, so one of the creators of that 70s show says that that's not true, that 70s show is based on his own experience. But again, that tells you something about the same way that Dazed gets more specific and becomes more universal. It's the same for that 70s show, right? It's like this guy says it was his experience, and other people say it was Richard Linklater's.
Yeah, no doubt. What is next for you writing wise? Would you do another oral history, or are you moving on to other types of writing?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about doing another oral history. I might still do one in the future, but right now I'm writing a novel.
Cool.
Yeah, it might be too early to say what it's about until it actually becomes a real thing, but
that's fine.
I'm trying.
Say less. Yeah. That's fine. I'll read it when it comes out. That's great. Cool. Well, hey, thank you for taking all this time again. I really enjoyed the book. Everyone should read it. If you're even just if you're interested in movies, I think just how movies get made, I think it's a good book. But yeah, so the last question I always ask before we go, what music have you been listening to lately?
Oh, you know who I love and listen to over and over again is this guy, Christian Lee Hutson. Do you know him? So he is what I would say is, if you imagine a Raymond Carver short story set to music by Elliott Smith.
Wow. Okay.
And his lyrics are incredible to me. And the music is great. He plays with Phoebe Bridgers sometimes. So that puts you in a certain context. But that's the record I've been listening to a lot lately. Tell me yours. I always want to listen to new stuff.
Well, seeing this movie got me listening to Dr. John. So I don't know if I'm like the new music king over here. And
hey, Dr. John's a great answer.
Besides that, I have 3 kids. So Laurie Berkner and Raffi is what I've been listening to mostly. That's my musical diet around my house.
I feel you. I think the Frozen soundtrack was my number one on Spotify. So I'm right there with you.
In Kanto, Frozen. All that stuff. So cool. Well, hey, thank you so much again, and please come back sometime and we'll talk about whatever you want. And this has been a lot of fun. So
that'd be great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Cool. Have a good rest of your morning here.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, RSS, and now Spotify. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. If you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Also, if you want to call or text the show for any reason, the number is 317-674-3547. Until next time.